All right, I think we're just about good to kind of get started while we wait on some more stragglers to come in as they catch us through the first slides. But good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. Today we're going to be talking about cybersecurity, the IoT cybersecurity landscape as a whole, and the specific policies and controls that we implement here at Triton Sensors. This is one of the most important conversations that we get to have with our partners and our end users. It's not always the most exciting, I will admit, but it's absolutely necessary and it can ease everyone's minds. And if we don't talk about it, it can cause some problems. So just on the intro side, my name is Jack Carissi. I'm one of the co-founders here at Triton Sensors. I'm also joined by Jamie.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jamie Lopez. I am the Director of Sales here at Triton. Like Jack said, not a super exciting topic, but we're going to try to make it really fun and as painless as possible to talk about today. If you do have any questions or anything, drop them in the chat. I will try to, I'm going to monitor the chat and I will interrupt Jack as he's talking through all this stuff to get your questions answered. So, good morning.
Yeah, that's great. Jamie thought it was so invigorating talking about cybersecurity that she said, Jack, you can do the whole thing. So that's how you know how she feels about it. Okay, awesome. Yeah, so quick agenda. We're just going to start setting the stage. Section one and two, kind of the same thing, talking about the IoT and cybersecurity space as a whole. Then we're going to dive into the heart and the meat of the conversation, which is going to be around our security program and policies at Triton Sensors. We'll end with what this means for our partners and for our end users, and then we'll wrap everything up with a live Q&A, some closing remarks, how to follow up, etc. If you have any specific questions. But as Jamie said, if you have any questions on the current section or the current slide, we're going to be monitoring that as we go through. So feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll answer them as we can. Okay, thanks, Chase. So to set the stage, I want to just start and kind of ground why we're having this conversation at all. And that's really to talk about how cybersecurity, especially for physical security devices, has become inseparable from the direct implications that it can have on your environment and on your network. It's no longer just hardware sitting in your facility without a network connection. It's now become actual assets that sit on your network, which we'll talk a little bit about in the next slide, and how this can impact you. And it's something that you really need to monitor and make sure that you're choosing vendors in which you trust and making sure that they're taking the correct responsibilities in their cybersecurity programs. So just to start with a quick question, a little icebreaker. Who actually, when you're asked about your knowledge in cybersecurity, how do you feel? We have a couple of choices up on the screen for you. 3, very confident. 2, somewhat confident. 1, not very confident. And we left the last choice for it. That's why I signed up.
That's the choice I would make, obviously.
Number 3, very confident.
No, no, no. That's why I'm here.
Oh, fair. But we're supposed to be, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, gotcha. Okay, awesome. All right, so great. Whoever is very confident, I still ask that you stay on, and learn some more. Maybe you can ask some of the hard-hitting questions, so that could be good. Otherwise, great. These are some great results. Okay, thank you very much. All right. So again, why cybersecurity actually matters for physical security technology. And that's because the IoT devices are uniquely risky. And that is the reality of the situation. They're always on. Often they can be forgotten about after install. At least for us that try, that's the goal, is that you're not worrying about us after you install, other than the alerts that we're helping you monitor. And sometimes too, they can collect sensitive environmental data. In our case, it may not be personally identifiable information, but for cameras, for example, or things like that, sometimes it can collect and store sensitive data. And also, the line between your IT department and physical security has effectively disappeared. When we have a sensor installed, we are having an IT asset on your network or on the end user's network, and this is going to be the IT team's department. They have to control it. They have to monitor that. And this is a stat here on the right that comes from Palo Alto Networks. They've been around forever, and they did a study that 57% of IoT devices contain medium or high severity vulnerabilities on shipment. So that can mean that half of the devices that we have on the market come with meaningful security problems built in. Unfortunately, that's the landscape that we're operating in right now, and that's the landscape that you as an end user or your customers are buying into whenever they're picking a vendor. A breach in a sensor can cascade quickly. It can lead to data exposure on your network, liability on your network. It can call for regulatory action. And in the case of a vendor, it can really bring reputational harm. That can really be a problem. You're expected to be serving your customers. We're in the security industry most of the time. That's what we closely align with. And if we're not taking the right precautions on cybersecurity, that can really, we're not doing our job. So regulations like HIPAA, FERPA, and emerging state-specific IoT laws, they're tightening every single year. So again, to bring it back to the partner, your reputation is really tied to the vendors you recommend, or if you're an end user, to the vendors that you're choosing. So for example, if we at Triton Sensors were passing our cybersecurity audits with zero exceptions, that's protecting you as well, and that's us reassuring that you're choosing the correct vendor. So I would like to ask another question here. So if you are an integrator or a partner, have any of your potential customers in the past month required SOC 2 certification? If you are an end user, do you require a SOC 2 certification for IoT devices to sit on your network or to even start the conversation? Again, there should be a pop-up here with a yes and a no. Okay, interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Seems like a pretty much a split down the middle here. Leaning a little bit towards no, though, actually. So yeah, very interesting. And I'm sure, even a couple of years ago, that would have been even more skewed towards people answering no. All right, so before we get into what we at Triton specifically do, I want to talk a little bit more about what the landscape, some current attacks in this cybersecurity, maybe some more pointed questions that you could receive from an end user, or if you are an end user, what pointed questions you should be thinking about when considering a vendor. We want you to be fluent in this language as well, so that you can speak credibly when someone asks about what policies we support, how we uphold our cybersecurity responsibility here at Triton Sensors. So in recent years, there's been a clear uptick in attacks targeting either building management, physical security systems specifically, and not just the traditional IT infrastructure. So the five vectors over the past, call it, really since 2017, the five vectors that have been the most popular are network-based attacks, which can be man in the middle with unauthorized access, monitoring your traffic, receiving packets. It can also be firmware exploitation and unpatched vulnerabilities. And IoT devices specifically fall into this. And most IoT devices by nature are not automatically updated. So if you think even if we have a cloud platform, if you have a device that's sitting on-prem, even if that vendor is pushing out new firmware updates, it's not as regular as we're used to in our day and age with software, with cloud-based software, where they're only hosting one instance or they're hosting a cluster of instances, and they can just update those, and us as end users, we get the notification to update, may say that our software is out of date or something like that. That's really where physical devices still do not meet that expectation. As well as credential stuffing and default password attacks. That was another one of the most commonly reported, is that when someone gets a physical device out of box, whether it be a router at your home network or one of these devices, is you actually never change the password. It can also be supply chain compromise. So that's really speaking towards not necessarily physical supply chain, but of the sense that all of us rely on different vendors, whether it be personally or in your facilities. And that means that not only are you responsible for your own network and IT infrastructure, but now you're depending on these other vendors as well. And it creates a chain of responsibility that you now share with the vendors that you're choosing. So any one of the links in the chain that can have a vulnerability that can kind of break the entire chain. And then as well, data exfiltration from cloud connected platforms. And that's really just the reality. And another part of the reality is that if you're familiar with cybersecurity, for some of you that answered that question earlier in the poll, you realize that these are pretty basic failures, not necessarily super sophisticated hacking. For example, default passwords or unencrypted communications, no vulnerability patch management. These are things that really should be addressed at the architecture level when you're thinking about building a device and serving customers on a large scale, which we at Triton here put first. That's one of the first things that we think about. Some of the sectors that are most affected in what we read and kind of matches up with the markets that our partners and our end users fall into is K through 12, healthcare, government, commercial real estate was another big one. And these sectors can be so common because a lot of the data is very sensitive, and for a bad actor or a threat actor from a hacking standpoint knows that you really need that data and you really need to come to some sort of compromise and quickly and can take advantage of that. Okay, so that's really what I wanted to ask you. So how many people, if you guys were or were not familiar, are aware of the recent IoT vulnerabilities or just physical devices in general?
Jack, so our password should not be password 123 for logging into my computer every day.
As long as you have a capital P, it's fine. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, again, most people are aware of these, and that's great. Actually, it's just the reality of the situation. So now too, we're going to talk a little bit about what good looks like in IoT security specifically. So these are things, again, you see we have good in quotation marks that should really be baseline thresholds for vendors. So I asked earlier if you as an end user or as a reseller have seen customers that are requiring SOC 2 certification. For us personally, what we've seen, especially at the end of 25 and in the beginning of 2026 here, is that this has become common and really a required thing to even enter the conversation when trying to get into procurement teams or large scale contracts and things like that. It's table stakes, no longer just an add-on. So we'll talk about a couple of the benchmarks here. Again, we have encrypted data transmission. This should be TLS, TLS 1.2 at a minimum, HTTPS between the device and the cloud, as well as your role-based access control and multi-factor authentication, regular vulnerability scanning, and patch cadence for when one of those vulnerabilities is identified, incident response planning, and test and recovery procedures. So again, that one is also very important, and it's kind of counterintuitive because we're going to sit here talking about, all the ways to prevent an attack and, how we at Triton take the right steps to make sure that something doesn't happen. But it's just equally as important to say, okay, but in the future, you don't know what you don't know. They may come out with some exploitation. So what measures and safety precautions do we have in place that if we were to be in that scenario, we're limiting it and we're also going to patch it very quickly? Another thing that is, normally required is third-party audited security programs. SOC 2, for example, at Triton, we have SOC 2 Type 2, which we're super, super proud and pleased to share. And we're kind of going to walk through that a little bit later. And again, specifically at Triton, we take in data privacy by design. So we're non-identifying, non-recording where possible, unless required by legislation. And with our devices, that's kind of our whole mantra, is that we're providing insights into those areas without capturing any PII. Okay, now the heart of the conversation. This is the entertaining part. So we're going to walk through our security program a little bit step by step. And everything that we're going to talk about in the following slides, it came directly out of our SOC 2 Type 2 audit report. And so, we're not just doing this for marketing and awareness purposes, but this is our audited reality. So another question focusing around SOC 2 is that who's aware of what a SOC 2 Type 2 certification is, and has anyone here gone through this certification in the past year? Yes. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So for the people who answered yes, my heart is with you. Because as you know, it is a definitely a marathon. So we're going to go through a little bit about we're going to actually define it, but it's definitely a lot to maintain and a lot to be thinking about at the same time. So for those of you that answered no, or if you've heard of it but you haven't gone through it, we're just gonna kind of recap is that, SOC 2 is an independent audit of security controls against the AI CPA trust services criteria. So this is the gold standard for SaaS applications and cloud connected products. And type 2 specifically is the more rigorous version. So it does not just check that controls exist on paper, but it tests that they actually operate over a period of time. So ours was a 3-month window. We worked with Advantage Partners out of Seattle. They were great. They're a CPA firm that specializes in SOC 2 Type 2 audits. And the results that we obtained for it were great. So an unqualified opinion, which is the highest possible outcome that a SOC 2 Type 2 audit can produce, and 0 testing exceptions. So that means that as we were going through our controls, all of them passed, and we were making sure that we upheld all of those things throughout the audit window. The security criteria covered was CC1 through CC9, which is all of the common criteria. So this includes access management, change control, risk assessment, incident response, vendor management, etc. And what this means for our partners and our end users is that you have a tangible report that you can either share with procurement teams, share with your IT department, and these reports are specifically designed to be provided to the user entities and business partners of the vendor being audited. So to start this out, again, the whole theme of this is how we protect customer data. So you'll see we have a diagram on the right-hand side here that is when data leaves your sensor or a customer's sensor, it is encrypted the whole time using TLS the entire way, TLS 1.2, the entire way to our cloud. No plain text ever on the network. And once it lands in AWS, every data store that we hold, that holds sensitive information is encrypted at rest. The auditor, this was independently reviewed and verified with SSL certification inspection and storage configuration review. We also maintain a formal data classification policy. So every piece of data is categorized as public, either public internal, customer data, or company data. And this is not, always, this is not just out there for show. We have it documented. Our employees are trained that way, and we go through the audit process with this, as well as our encryption keys. So again, we talk about encryption, but it's not very effective if people can gain access to your encryption keys. But these are restricted to authorized personnel only. And if you're not too familiar with encryption as a whole, it's, we treat these like you would treat an alarm code or an entrance code to your building. Another very important part is access control. So we lead with least privilege, with a least privilege framework, which is from role-based access control. And this ensures that the operations team only has access to production environments. Not all engineers, not all employees. We enforce least privilege to make sure that people who are not supposed to be involved, not supposed to be touching our production environments, are not able to. Even for those who can touch those environments, multi-factor authentication is mandatory for 100% access. There's no exceptions, no service accounts without it. And this is one of the single most effective controls that you can place against those credential-based attacks that we talked about a little bit earlier. We also do quarterly access reviews to ensure that stale access will get caught and revoked immediately on a regular cadence, because people change roles. People also leave projects. They may leave the company, move to a different department. So this ensures that we can keep up with it. Now, for those people that are leaving, we ensure a 3-day offboarding SLA. So when an employee leaves, we ensure that their access is gone immediately. And this was actually sampled during our audit period to make sure that people who are no longer with us at Triton Sensors did not retain access. We also ensure that our production data stores, they have unique keys and secure authentication mechanisms. So no shared credentials, no password reuse across different environments. So another question I have for you all is, are you doing access reviews or cybersecurity checks at your company? So yeah, 50-50. And that's pretty common. I think that is again, that's something that it's not always the most fun. It's not what you're excited to come into to work and to do, but it's absolutely necessary preventing the fact that it could happen in the future. So I would definitely encourage you to visit, even if you're not providing devices, to look and make sure, do former employees still have credentials? Does everyone have admin access? And just some basic things like that. Now moving on to actual network and infrastructure security. So again, we have another diagram here on the right. So our entire production environment and infrastructure runs inside of AWS. So this is going to be our own private network that we have inside AWS that we can control the strict inbound and outbound rules. We also use AWS Guard Duty, which is a great product, and this is our intrusion detection layer. So this is AWS native, it's automated and it's continuous. And that continuous is a really important part because if you remember when we were talking about earlier of the baseline for what you should have as an IoT company, that's vulnerability management. And this means that we don't have to wait for a human to spot an issue or for a customer to let us know that there's been some intrusion. We're able to have 24/7 monitoring, as well as Datadog, which is going to be our alerting layer. So combined with Guard Duty, it means that we have eyes on all of our environments around the clock. We also configure firewalls to block unauthorized access by default, and these are reviewed annually against hardening standards. And the only way that internet traffic actually reaches our platform is through designated HTTPS endpoints via AWS's Elastic Load Balancer, which ensures that we have no open ports, we don't have any exposed services beyond what is necessary and what we're expecting to receive them on. We also have anti-malware deployed and routinely updated across all relevant systems that can have access to any environments, which is standard cybersecurity hygiene, but again, worth assuring everyone and worth saying out loud. Now to our vulnerability management and change control. So we scan every quarter at a minimum, and again, whenever we make a significant change. And critical and high findings are tracked as tickets until confirmed remediation. So on top of our scheduled scans, it's a tongue twister. Uh, we also, as I said, with with the AWS products, is that we have continuous detection monitoring. So again, quarterly reviews and on-demand reviews whenever a new risk emerges or has the chance to emerge. For our change control, no code reaches our production environments without passing through our formal SDLC. And SDLC stands for Software Development Lifecycle. And that can be different at every company, but normally it just ensures that you're doing the right practices. So for us, that means proper documentation, quality assurance testing, user acceptance testing, software developer management approval, and peer review among developers. We also take the measures to ensure that our development, our testing, and our production environments are completely separated. So they run on completely different instances, and that means that a bug or an experiment in a development environment cannot actually accidentally reach production. During our SOC 2 Type 2 audit, we actually, the auditor sampled real changes. So they were able to verify these controls and make sure that we operate as designed with zero exceptions. And another really important part in this we talked about earlier is, okay, but what if a vulnerability does occur? What if something happens? And that's where having your version control is very important. So we utilize GitHub, I think probably all development companies do, and that's our source of truth. So every change to a code base is attributed to a person, it's reviewable, and in our case, it's required reviewed. And most importantly, it's also reversible. So we can roll back those things immediately if something is to happen and ensure no downtime and ensure that we're patching things right away. So on that same narrative, we're going to talk about kind of our formal incident response and business continuity plan. So if something goes wrong, we have a documented playbook. Our incident response plan isn't just sitting around in Google Docs. It's been tested and we require our team to be trained on this. So there's normally 5 steps that go with it. The detection, which is the monitoring and alert of the actual vulnerability. From there, it's going to be assessments. So what's the severity? What's the scope of the vulnerability? And what are your escalation techniques? From there, we're going to talk about how you can contain and mitigate any impacts on this. Afterwards, it's going to be recovering and restoring that services through patches, and then also it's going to be reviewing that. So post-incident analysis, how can we ensure why did this happen in the first place, and is there anything along the same theme that's close to this that could maybe trigger this again? So all of our security incidents are logged, tracked, resolved, and communicated to affected parties per policy because we want to ensure that there is a clear chain of accountability, not only internally at Triton Sensors on our development team, but for our customers as well. So our BCD, our business continuity and disaster recovery plan, we test this annually through tabletop exercises. Again, the auditor reviewed this policy and as well as our exercise. As well as cybersecurity insurance. So also having a financial backstop. And again, just another signal that we're taking accountability for our security posture. Not that money solves the problem, but sometimes it can alleviate the pain. You know, it's showing showing that we're taking this accountability seriously, as well as a whistleblower channel. So this is going to be mostly for internal, for our employees, so that they have an anonymous way to raise concerns. And you know, this culture of making sure that everyone is held accountable, we think that it really it works and it thrives if people can speak up safely. It also saves yourself if you're the one that accidentally built the vulnerability. Then you have the chance to speak up anonymously. Okay. The last aspect too that we're going to talk about on this side is going to be around the people and the culture of security. So security for us, again, it's not just a technical program. It's not just training at Triton. It's really a part of our culture because again, we're in the most of the times we're associated with the security industry. So if we're not doing the best that we can to uphold our responsibility internally, you know, we can't ask customers to trust us by putting assets on your network. So every employee, we're trained on hire, bound from policy from day one, accountable. And we also have our security awareness training, which is going to happen within the first month of your employment and happens annually after that. No one is exempt. Like even for our employees internally, it's not the most exciting meetings. As well as background checks required before any access is provisioned. We also require confidentiality agreements and a code of conduct. They are signed at hire. Violations are also are documented, and they have real teeth for our disciplinary action. Our annual performance reviews, they also take into account for security and your security accountability. So it's a part of how every employee is evaluated. And also our board receives annual briefing on cybersecurity and privacy risk. So this has an executive and a board level view. It's not just the attention for some developers and just or smaller security team. So we're a team of about 28 people, and that allows us to make sure that security accountability is personal. It's not diffused across thousands of employees across the globe or across different sites. And that's really one of the advantages that we have as a company of our size, that we can really bake that into everyone and bake it in from the culture at day one. Okay, so I know that was a long rant, but a little bit of a monologue there. So I would like to break it up with one of these questions. So we talked about five different, excuse me, four. So we talked about four different main things there. So I want to talk about the weakest link in your cybersecurity stack. So human error and social engineering, outdated software or firmware, third party, and that supply chain risk that we talked about, or people again.
It's a tough one.
Yeah, right.
Reminds me when I used to give like open book quizzes to kids.
Okay. So yeah, Again, this is obviously not a hard science, but for most of the research that we've done and what we've seen, it is people. It really is people. It can be password reuse across different platforms. It's some of the things that you can't always monitor for. So again, it's really just something to emphasize, and you just need to ensure that your employees, our employees, all people are really thinking about this, and they're becoming more aware of their practices on the internet and how they take cybersecurity measures in their own life and in their career. Okay, so now bringing it back to our attendees and what this means for our partners, we've talked about what we do internally, and I would like to connect that then with either your sales conversation as a rep or an integrator, or if you're doing an internal sales pitch, maybe for your IT team or for the procurement team. So this is actually how you can go back to your customers or go back to the rest of your team internally and talk about a customer security review. So our security protecting you, we're again, this is really commenting on that supply chain risk. You know, when you recommend Triton, you're recommending a SOC 2 Type 2 certified and audited platform, and not all physical security vendors can say that. So that means that you have an audit report that you can hand to your customer's procurement team, you can hand to your internal IT team, and that's a real differentiator. So this is also a shared responsibility model, as we talked about with that supply chain. So it's not only your IT infrastructure, but it's all of the other third parties that you're incorporating. And we fall into that category. So we also ask that partners and end users are implementing complementary controls on their side. And that's just kind of through our security commitments that are formalized in our MSA and our terms of service. So some of those complementary controls, all of the, especially actually in the SOC 2 Type 2 report, it identifies the controls that user entities, such as partners or end users, should have in place, and we listed a couple of them here. So one is going to be to manage and supervise how end users actually use the Triton platform. So this prevents misuse and reduces insider threat risk. This can be from stale access. This can be a person that has admin access on the Triton cloud that should not, or on their Triton device that should not have that access. We also suggest that you maintain your own disaster recovery and business continuity plans. This ensures continuity on your end, even if access to Triton is temporarily unavailable. We also ask that you notify Triton immediately of any suspected security breach or compromised credentials. This can enable faster containment and protects all shared customers. We also ask that in your configuration process, you're providing us with an approved list for those configuration and security changes. This makes sure that the changes in the future are authorized by the right people on your side. And lastly, that you understand and comply with the contractual obligations to Triton. This keeps our shared responsibility, shared security responsibility, and make sure that everyone is on the same page. And if any of these raise questions for you or your team, we're happy to walk through this with a one-on-one session, a little bit more in depth, maybe, if you want to follow up after the webinar. Okay, so almost last, or I think last question that I have for you all. We talked about disaster recovery and business continuity, so I'm curious to see if you at on your team, if anyone has that in place. Yes. Okay, I love to see that. So yes, so we have really good results from the. I'm not. Is everyone able to see the results from the poll? Probably should have asked that at the beginning, not the end. But that's great. We have a lot of yeses, and for some of these you responded no. I not calling you out, but definitely highly suggest that you think about that and maybe look to implement that sometime in the future. Okay, so that is the formal walkthrough, and now we want to open it up for your questions. So we want to encourage scenario-based ones, so maybe like a specific question or a specific control that you've been asked by a customer or that your IT team has been bringing up. recently, this is the time to share that. Um, as well as if you have any more specific questions, a one-on-one session is more than fine as well.
There was a few questions about if we're going to be sharing the recording of this after, and yes, we will be sending that out, as well as we can send out the slides. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Somebody asked if, as a potential customer, can we set up a call with our IT security and legal team to discuss the security specific items? Please do.
Yes,
We would be happy.
absolutely. Absolutely. Another thing that we'll be sending out as well is a link to our trust center. So we're glad to set up a call and talk through those things virtually, but we also host all of those things with access. So if you are a potential customer, you have access to all of our security resources, and this should enable your IT security and legal team to be able to see all of the policies that they're looking to confirm.
Absolutely. And we will send out the recording. Okay, I think that we'll hang out if anybody does have any
Yeah.
questions. If you want to wrap it up, Jack.
Yeah, but otherwise, yeah. So a couple of key takeaways that we have here is that so Triton, we hold a clean SOC 2 Type 2 certification with zero exceptions. This means that you can also pass this on and you can request that report from us. Our controls cover the full security spectrum across access, data, network infrastructure, change control, incident management, and risk. And also, partnering with Triton gives you a certified, audited security story to tell your customers. So that's a great way to wrap it up. We have my contact and Jamie's contact there on the bottom left. You can also scan that QR code at the bottom center to book a meeting for a deeper security review. And as well, visit our trust center. Definitely encourage that as well. Thank you all for joining, and thank you for being a Triton partner as well. If you're a potential customer, I hope this answered some questions and pushes you in the direction to become a Triton partner. It's something we take very seriously here, and this program is how we earn that trust.